I know one thing you mentioned earlier to us, Tom, is that Jabali Jr. had remained so almost emotionless during this whole trial, and that certainly changed understandably when the verdict came down today.
Absolutely, Joanne. And you know what was kind of interesting is before the verdict was read, Jabali's attorneys were looking for him. He had left the building with his family, perhaps to grab a breath of fresh air, maybe a cup of coffee here in downtown Mount Clemens. And they were looking for him as the jury said they had already reached a verdict. I don't think anyone thought after just an hour there would be a verdict ready to go in the courtroom. So he ran back inside of the building. His attorneys found him. We all rushed inside the courtroom. All the folks that were standing outside didn't really think this would happen so quickly, so we all ran inside. And as you said, he really has showed no emotion during this trial. And then when the verdict was read, he clutched his lawyer, he gave her a huge hug, he said a prayer, and it looked like he was almost about to cry. His family members certainly were, as they had been sitting there for the last week and a half, really supporting him as that trial went forward.
You know, I've covered many trials over the years. Usually when a verdict comes in that quickly, it means it was just a slam dunk case either for the prosecution or the defense. What went wrong with this prosecution case?
Well, the juror that we talked to said that most of the jurors agreed that there was no direct evidence, no physical evidence, and that means there were no fingerprints or DNA evidence that was taken from the scene. So it was really hard for them, even the ones that thought initially that he might be guilty. It was very difficult for them to get on board and really determine that this was a guilty verdict because, again, they couldn't draw anything from that scene. There was no weapon. There were no bloody clothes. There were all of the evidence that was presented was circumstantial evidence, and that can be enough to render a conviction or a guilty verdict beyond a reasonable doubt. But in this case, the jurors said without any of that evidence, they just couldn't do it.
I found it so interesting, Tom, where the family all came down on this, because of course we keep saying Ron Jabali Jr.'s family, but these were also family members of the couple who were killed here. Was there anyone who fell on the side thinking that he was guilty of this crime, or were they all standing behind him?
Well, not during the trial, but the prosecutor did introduce evidence during the trial where he said that Ron Jabali had threatened one of his uncles after he had appeared or planned to appear before the grand jury that eventually brought this case to trial. And I gotta say to Stephen Kaplan, watching him, this is my first time seeing him, he was a very persuasive orator. He had some very persuasive arguments. He really did a good job gluing this whole case together. But again, the jury just didn't see anything in terms of real evidence, and I think it was hard for them to kind of really send someone to jail for the rest of his life without having any of that DNA evidence, a murder weapon, or any bloody clothes, anything to tie him to the scene. But as you said, I think at the beginning there was definitely some tension in the family, but toward the end, at least it seemed like there was solidarity then.
All right, Tom, thank you very much. And of course, in the law's eyes, there's still a killer out there someplace.
Yeah,
but
right.
We'll see what happens next. Tom Waite, thank you for the live report.